Hello. Well, it looks like we're live. Hello, all. Garland Nixon here. I am with Andrei Martyanov and Scott Ritter. Plenty to talk about post counteroffensive. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here with Andre and Scott, and another good time. We're going to have lots of interesting stuff to talk about. I think somebody's got getting a little
Oh
feedback.
yeah,
That may be
there's
you,
an
Scott.
echo.
Yeah, that may be. Okay, there we go. So at any rate, what we're going to do is we got several different subjects we're going to talk about, but since we're talking post offensive, Andre, prior to the to the counter offensive, as it were, as they called it, um, you pretty much predicted it. You just said, yeah, the Russians are sitting there. These poor fools are going to go running into minefields. They're going to get blown to smithereens. And that's kind of where we are. Your thoughts on the overall offensive? Did it go as you thought? And where are we now? We'll start with you, Andre.
Um, it went worse than I thought. I mean, I would at that point of time I was expecting them to overcome this what is called four-field Pritpolye, which is the tactical and operational category. It's the front in front of the first defense line. They never got to defense line. I spoke to my people, and yeah, they just basically everything what is happening is contained within this what is called four-field Pritpolye. So, and I expected them at least to get to the first line and to start trying to break through, and see a lot of casualties there on both sides. But as the time proceeded, went on, they're like, oh my God, this is it, just if you, it's classic operational wisdom. You didn't get the breakthrough in the first 3 or 5, 6 days. It's over, man. So it's over. You lost operational during Operation Citadel, okay? Classic Kursk battle, classic strategic defense. Russians, 3 lines, Red Army, 3 lines of defense. They go in, and we are talking about not Zaluzhny for crying out loud or Pentagon generals. We're talking about Model, Manstein, Hoff. First class, first rate, military leaders with the incredible knack for the armored warfare. And guess what? It all ended on the 12th with the huge, clashes. And usually they call it Prokhorovka, but it was Katukov also with his armor fist, which was basically meeting them. And after that, they started to withdraw. They terminated Citadel because of the other issue of the news front. They started to move the SS Panzer divisions there because they knew it's over, man. They knew that and after that, of course, Russians started their massive strategic offensive, Operation Rumyantsov, and that was it. That's and this what is happening now. It's not counteroffensive. They're just moving. There's what's called rocket, number of the roads which go in parallel with the line of the contact. So they move those, resources here and there, and they try to, find some kind of the soft spots along the whole line, which is good luck with that. They get annihilated. And I look at the scale of losses on their side. It's just mind-boggling, So it's so they just basically throw corpses after corpses, and that's what it is.
Scott Ritter, your thoughts on the offensive? Did it go the way you expected it to go? And where are we now as far as the battlefield?
I think like Andre, first of all, when you take a look at Russian defensive doctrine, especially, it's not like we have to guess. The modern day author of this, Lieutenant General Alexander Romanchuk, wrote a detailed article derived from his recent work at the Combined Arms Academy. I think the article was published in March. This is the man who, by the way, designed the. Here's the irony of this. Surprise is supposed to be one of these things that militaries try to accomplish. Last fall, the Ukrainians laid out in great detail what the force structure was that they were looking for. 9 brigades to be built up to NATO standards using this Western equipment, 3 additional brigades to be built up within Ukraine, 12 brigades. And then they said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take these 12 brigades and we're going to, starting at Robotyno, we're going to advance to Tokmak, and then we're going to advance to Melitopol, and we're going to cut the land bridge between Russia and Crimea. So they defined their axis of advance. They did this in December. Zaluzhny gives an interview with The Economist and with other outlets, and he basically says, that's our goal. I can beat these guys, he said. I can beat them. Just give me what I need. Give me these 12 brigades, and I will take Melitopol and sever the land bridge and bring Crimea under crisis. Okay, right about March is when Alexander Romanchuk was pulled out of the Combined Arms Academy, where he wrote this doctrine, and he was placed in charge of building the defenses where? On the line of advance from Robotyno to Melitopol. He said, if you guys are going to define your primary axis of advance, I'm the guy, I'm going to build the defense. And he did. Now, some of these trenches are built, but he perfected it. He built the layering. And as Andrei said, a key aspect of this defense, it's flexible defense. That's the notion. That means that there will be no Alamos. Now, for anybody out there who's not an American or a Texan, the Alamo is where, of course, the Texans famously said, we will fight and die here. We're not going to retreat. There was a time in World War II where Stalin gave orders, not 1 inch backwards. We fight and we die here. Mamayev Kurgan and Stalingrad is an example of that. Popov's house, things of that nature. And it was incorporated into some of Soviet defensive doctrine. But General Romanchuk, he has none of that. There will be no Alamos. It is flexible defense. That means the forward defense zone, they are going, first of all, they look at the map. Now, normally you want to do intelligence preparation of the battlefield. So you do your own layovers and you have a whole bunch of smart guys look at the map and go, what's the primary axis of advance do you think they take? Oh, right here. Okay, we'll build our defenses. Well, thanks to Zaluzhny, they made it pretty simple. They're going to come straight at Robotyno, and they're going to move to Tokmak, and they're going to Melitopol. So the Russians take a look at the terrain and go, Robotyno's here. It's sort of in low ground. There's a horseshoe of high ground around Robotyno. So why don't we project out a little bit, and we'll build this cushion zone, this forward defense zone over here. We'll lay a whole bunch of minefields. We'll put other obstacles in place. We'll set up ambushes. We'll have artillery pre-registered, and we'll let them come to us. And what we want them to do is come to Robotyno, and we're going to beat the living snot out of them, and then we're going to deflect them. Where? Oh, let's look at the map again. Why don't we deflect them towards the village? And Andrei, help me here. Verobovoy?
Yeah, Vorobyov.
So you're going to deflect a little bit to the east and north. Why? It's low ground. And all around this village is high ground, a nice little horseshoe of it. So you bring them into Robotyno, you pound them out, and then you deflect them because that's the only outlet they have. So they're going to squeeze out over here. And you put your dragon's teeth in your trench there, and because that's going to separate the infantry from the armor. It's also going to compel them to focus their point on where they're at, more artillery. This was all designed in advance by the Russians. They sat there and looked at the map and said exactly how we want this battle to unfold. I read the article and I said, okay, this is how the battle's going to unfold. But I always thought that if you're going to do flexible defense, that means that you're going to slap them around a little bit, fall back to your positions, slap them around, fall back to your positions, slap them around, fall back. The first line of defense is designed to be breached. It's intended to be breached. It's not supposed to be the Alamo. They're supposed to breach the first line of defense, come to the second line where you hold them off a little bit more, but then you fall back to the third line. And at the third line, you hold fast while the reserves come in, pinch off the base, slaughter everybody, game over. So I'm thinking, well, the Ukrainians are going to come in because, my God, they got 12 brigades. They got the Leopard. They got everything. They're going to come at you, and they're going to roll it in. The Russians are going to stop them outside Robottino, deflect them towards the village that begins with a V, and then they're going to pierce the line of defense. Then they're going to follow the terrain features, again, around high ground. They're going to get slaughtered. They're going to come out a little bit to the northeast of Tokmak, where they'll hit the second line of defense. And then they're going to get wrapped up there. And about that time, the Russians are going to pinch them off and kill them. That's what I thought would happen. I thought that they would have cleared Robottino day 3, day 4, day 5, around there. Turns out they couldn't do it. They still don't have control of Robottino. It's sort of like in the gray zone. They own some of it, but Robottino doesn't exist anymore. You can't live in Robottino. But they just recently got squeezed out to the village that begins with a V, and they're moving in that direction. There was some video out today that showed some strikers and some martyrs may have gotten past the dragon's teeth, but they got slaughtered and annihilated. This has been an abysmal failure for the Ukrainians. You knew it was a failure when they had to, they had 12 brigades, and basically the brigades are supposed to operate, I would imagine, in 4 waves. So you put in your first 3 brigades, because they attacked with 3 brigades initially, and the first 3 brigades are supposed to, go through the crumple zone, the forward defense zone, but then you lose your combat power. I mean, you're going to take casualties. Everybody knows that. And you sort of peter out. Then the next 3 brigades come into a passage of lines, and they keep the momentum. You never pause. You never pause. Once you've engaged with the enemy, you keep pushing. 3 more brigades come in. They push forward. They might get to the first defensive line before they peter out. Then 3 more brigades come in, punch through the first defensive line, accelerate to the second defensive line. And then the final 3 brigades, including the vaunted 82nd Airborne Brigade, that's been equipped with the Challenger tank. And it comes roaring in, bam, right through Tokmak, straight to Melitopol. The Russians surrender. Ruki Verk, they run, they break, they hide. It's victory for Ukraine. Champagne corks popping everywhere. That's the way it's supposed to be. You knew they were in trouble when the 82nd and the other 2 brigades got committed to take Robottino. Okay, they come rolling in, and the 82nd got punched in the face. They had to pull it back, regroup, and bring it and deflect it to the village begins with a V. And that's what they're doing right now. They're out there. They got their strikers. They got their martyrs. I don't know where the challengers went. I think the British said, "Get them out of the front line."
Yeah,
But the point is, this has been an abysmal failure for them. And the thing is, you knew it was going to fail. Why do I say that? Because this is a assault breaching operation, right, Andrei? Classic assault breaching operation. They were trained by NATO and Americans. American doctrine has a nice little acronym that we use. It's called SOSRA. The first S in SOSRA is suppression. Suppression means that you have artillery that suppresses enemy artillery. You have air that sweeps enemy air out of the way. You have air defense that prevents enemy air coming in. You have electronic warfare that's jamming the hell out of everything. You suppress the enemy. If you can't suppress the enemy, you're going to die. Sort of a pro tip. If the enemy's not suppressed, you're going to die. You're not going to succeed. At no time could anybody say that the Ukrainians were prepared to suppress the Russians. They weren't, because the Ukrainians don't have an air force that can sweep the skies clean. The Russians had run one of the most brilliant suppression of enemy air defense campaigns leading up to this counteroffensive, where they lured out all the Ukrainian air defense assets and blew them out of the way. So now there's no air defense that's taking out the Ka-52 alligators are roaming the front line, popping everything. Ukrainian artillery, this is the one area where the Ukrainians sort of got it right. I'll give them credit. Credit where credit's due. They brought in a lot of long-range 155 millimeter artillery that outranges their Russian counterparts, and they've been waging fairly effective counter-battery warfare. They've been knocking out the Russian artillery. They've been getting some momentary fire superiority in terms of suppression, but it doesn't last, because then the Lancets come out, and the Lancets hunt them down and start popping them off, and they have to retreat, and then you lose that. Suppression has to be continuous suppression. It isn't suppression if boom, 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 my head goes down, boom, I come up and I can fire my anti-tank guided missiles at you and kill you. They never suppressed, and we knew this. Now, how could they overcome the failure to suppress? Because they knew they didn't suppress. Horrific intelligence. horrific intelligence. And I have to think here, Andre, you can help me out if you think I'm off base here. I can be. This is purely an assessment. But Romanchuk's a genius. He is a genius. And he took two regiments, the 70th and the 291st of the 42nd motorized guards, motorized rifle. These two regiments sort of got slapped around last year. They had a tough time. One of them lost their commander. The other one lost some casualties. And they were withdrawn into a quiet sector. Robottino was considered to be a quiet sector where they were supposed to refit, et cetera. And they got a lot of mobilized guys to come in to fill in the gaps. And so, and right at the village of Robottino, now you would think if you knew the enemy was coming at Robottino, you'd want to put a unit that had unity of command there. But what Romanchuk did is he put the seam between the 291st and 70th right at Robottino. Now, why would you do that? Because you know the enemy is looking. And what do we know? We know that NATO went, that's the weak spot. Two regiments with a bad track record of performance on the battlefield. They've been staffed with mobilized troops. These guys are going to shoo hoy. Now, that's a Vietnam War term, but run away. Rookie Verk and Bagot, baby. They're going to run. You're going to hit the seam. There will be no command and control, inefficient coordination, and the Russians are going to run. All you have to do is hit them hard, hit them hard. And they hit them hard. And you know what? The 291st and the 70th, filled with these mobilized boys, stood like the Rock of Gibraltar. No breaking, no nothing. Not just them. If you look at the order of battle, they have a whole bunch of these BARS units, BARS being these reserve units that are called up. They're standing firm. They're holding the flanks. They brought in some paratrooper airborne units later on. They brought in mobilized. And Andre, again, got to help me out here because I think I know what I'm talking about, but I could be wrong. The 42nd had three regiments attached to it, the 70th, the 71st, and the 291st. But now what we're seeing is two additional regiments have come in attached to the 42nd, but these are regiments that have 4 digits. They're not the 71st, they're not the 100th. This is like the 1,421st Regiment. And I'm thinking this is a deep reserve regiment of mobilized troops that had brought in to supplement the 42nd Division's strength, meaning that as the battle
it is about the division. Actually, division structure has been implemented for a while now, and I know this not because I was there. Marat Khairuli, my good friend, the first-rate war correspondent, he's been talking about, guys, forget about brigades. We're primarily going into the division level action, and so you begin to attach units and set up the obviously command and control structure, which is a division. Although I have to say there is one nuance that in terms of which I agree with Scott completely. There was a momentary type of outranging and encounter battery fight between Ukrainians and Russians, especially considering the fact that M-STA-S, which is the main mobile artillery, 152 millimeter, it is up to 30 kilometers. I mean, most of them, especially with the rocket-assisted munitions, NATO artillery, which was present there, it's about around 40 kilometers. So it's 10 kilometers longer. Obviously, it's being addressed because Koalitia is coming in right now in numbers. And Koalitia with the Krasnopol 2 munition, it's 80 plus kilometer. So but there was actually, the issue was addressed at that time by Tornado. And Tornado is multiple launch rocket system. And that thing flies very far. And so while there was, as correctly Scott stated, there was obviously the mismatch, and especially when the number of the very good American counter battery radar were used, So, I mean, guess what? I mean, if you have the sledgehammer, it doesn't matter how you kill the flea, really. You can slap it or you can do this. The result will be the same if you do it against the hard place. And so MLRS tornadoes were used, and the result was devastating. That is why now there is no even the advantage which they can exploit and leverage. I'm talking about Ukrainians in terms of the outranging artillery. And again, now that they basically couldn't start the serial production of Kalitsa, which still didn't finish the tests, but state tests proved it to be, because it was used on the front line. It's an outstanding gun. And so they finally got it on the production line. And so now it is being delivered to the troops, and the troops have been already trained. So, but yeah, Scott is absolutely correct. And so, yeah, it's how do? You lure the person, or you lure your enemy into the what? You show them the soft spot. It is the same as actually what happened in Ardennes when nobody expected that. That's what did you have there? You had not the best forces, young forces who have been merely, in training, not very good cohesion, and they were resting their allied forces in the Ardennes forest. Germans knew where to strike. And so it took an enormous effort to basically contain that, So, and by that time, they already kind of penetrated to like 60, 65 kilometers at least. So, but here, yeah, that's the point. I was like, okay, they're gonna breach, as my friend Vladimir Trukhan says. You know what? People who command and those operational officers and generals who say the first line, the moment the enemy starts rolling, they begin to smoke several packs a day and just crawl on the, walls, because they know the guys on the front line, the first line, that's the line which eventually have to break. And of course, you will have many, casualties there. That is why they cannot sleep, because they know basically they sacrifice the guys. But that's the point. It's like, okay, day comes, second day, third day, then week, and then a couple of weeks, and it's like, oh yeah, forget it, man. And it's just, that's it.
Now, let me read something to you, because the question is where we are now. Seymour Hersh wrote an article today where he supposedly talked to American intelligence officials, and he said, the American intelligence official I spoke with spent the early years working against the Soviets, blah, blah, blah. But here's what the guy told him. But as he told me, the war is over. Russia has won. There is no Ukrainian offensive anymore, but the White House and the American media have to keep the lie going. The truth is, if the Ukrainian army is ordered to continue the offense, the army would mutiny. The soldiers aren't willing to die anymore, but this doesn't fit the BS that is being authored by the White House. Now, this allegedly came from intelligence officials to Seymour Hersh. Start with you, Andrei. Your thoughts on that? Because my question, I hear people saying the Russians now, they're going to make the big offensive move. They're getting ready to make their move now. And Scott knows, I've been saying all along, if I were the Russians, time's working on my side. I would not be in it, but everything's working out. But that's not say they're going to do it. President Putin's getting ready to go meet with President Xi. I don't know what's leading. Anyway, your thoughts? They're saying that the war's over. I mean, effectively militarily over as far as any.
No, yeah, it is over. And again, we need to understand time, same as maneuver, are actually strategic categories. The people who command anything, they think in terms of time. That's why I'm a watch freak, because it comes natural, It's you have to have watch, you have to have time, My wife was getting like delayed by 5 minutes. She said, oh, you begin to behave like, like freak. I said, no, that's the way it is, People told us to be at 5, we have to be there, 5 plus minus, So, and the point is that it was over for a while now, it is clear. And when you look at the dynamics, and when I was in Moscow, and again, what is funny, of course, we spoke with my friends, and all that, sitting and smoking cigars and talking. But there was a very interesting point, which I was conveying constantly. When Putin speaks about, like he did, 4 days ago, I believe, since the start of counteroffensive, they lost 71,500. He's not talking about casualties. He's talking about TIAs, killed in action. And there is another thing, and this is what everybody doesn't want to understand. Russia has a very developed system of the long-range fires. And there is it's not being stated by Russian Minister of Defense when they present daily, basically updates on those things. Ukraine is losing in terms of the military personnel and it has the KIAs, let alone wounded, and what is called 300. Cargo 200 you are killed, 300 you are wounded. Losses comparable to what we have on the front line. And that's the whole thing, which is like you roughly have to multiply 71,000 roughly by 1.5, 1.8, because there are so many of them who die at the basically what it could be tactical operational rear. If you look attentively, I mean, Russia, who we know runs out of missiles, every day now for the last what? So I mean, the whole thing is just nonstop. Just 2 days ago in Cherkasy, there is a hotel. Well, of course, intelligence works fine. There's also the other people who work on the ground there, undercover and things like that. It was the what's the name of it? The hotel where those mercenaries and all kinds of those foreign fighters have been living. Guess what? They got acquainted with Mr. Caliber, so guess what? How many Ukraine comes out and says, oh, there were 20 killed and something. And again, people in Cherkasy, they report that like streams of their, what's the name of it, ambulances and, all kinds of coroners and that. So guess how many died there? And it happens every day in different locations, different localities. And so the butcher's bill is horrifying. We are looking at the largest European war since the World War II. And those people who were pushing them politically, I have no sympathy for Kiev regime, obviously. I don't have sympathy for Nazis who die. Let them die in droves, which is happening. But people who pushed those people on the Ukrainian side into the meat grinder deliberately, both on Ukrainian side and both by those Pentagon and London generals. I don't know how UK can play any role here whatsoever. They are ignorant hags there. They never fought anything serious since the World War II. And so when you look at this, they have to understand they committed not just war crime, they committed the crime against humanity. And this is the fact which they do not understand. Milley just retired yesterday or today. Did he? What did he say? That, oh yeah, they breached the third line of defense in the next 48 hours they should be in Moscow, And this is the guy who have been the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff. Okay? And does he understand that now what we have officially confirmed, 500,000 killed alone, multiplied by 2 at least, you have 1.5 million casualties. This is unbelievable. Those people, Victoria Nuland's, all those, Petreuses and all that, do they even understand the scale of what they committed? Because this is the political pressure from Washington for this, puppets, sock puppet, Zelensky, who is nobody, So, and we have this situation. It will get much worse for Ukraine. The only reason Russia is sitting right now, first, why do you change the mode operandi when it works for you? It does what was set up, one of the strategic objectives, political objectives, demilitarization. And Ukraine have been pretty much demilitarized by now. Yesterday, the remnants of the Kharkov tractor plant have been basically, just killed. They cannot even repair tanks anymore. So, and the point is that in the end, what are you gonna do with this? Because can Russia go to on the offensive now? Of course it can. It has enough power to basically, swing into Kharkov, just bypass it, get the blockade type thing, and just go south. Does Russia want that? How much of the hostile population you're gonna take on the battlefield? That's what the whole thing is in play right now. And I think so that's the essence and substance of the strategic grand strategy discussion in Kremlin. And
Scott,
thank you.
Your thoughts on the kind of numbers that the casualty numbers that Andre is talking about, that we're hearing, the kind of damage that we've heard done to. So I've heard that, basically this is the third army that's been destroyed. Your thought about the level of destruction, and of course, as Andre said, and as I've said, you and I have discussed it. Do they now go on the offensive? Do they still sit and say, okay, you guys, we're going to keep hitting you and punching you all we want to, and we're in no rush? I don't know your thoughts on the casualty numbers, what they look like, your estimates of it, and then on to what, whether there'll be a big, what do they call it, the big arrow offensive or whatever. Scott Ritter.
I don't dispute Andrei's numbers at all. I agree with them. I will say this, we just don't know. It's a lot of analysis, a lot of, looking at probability of kill, factors, how much artillery is being employed. One of the things that enhances the lethality, back in the 80s when I was getting ready to fight the Soviets, they always outgunned us, they always outmanned us. That we knew that. But what we were going to make up for was superior maneuver, and precision long-range fires. Meaning that, yes, the Soviets can saturate an area with shells, but as long as we're maneuvering and we don't get locked in a fire cauldron, we will use long-range precision strike to take out command and control, take out logistics, to disrupt attacks, etc. And so everybody has always premised that the West has the superiority in precision strike capability. Not anymore. The Russians have precision strike, and they do it better. I'll tell you how they do it better. JDAMs. JDAMs is a satellite guided bomb. It's a kit that's put on a standard 500, 1,000, 2,000 pound bomb. And it allows a B-52 or an F-16 or some platform, F-35, to drop a bomb at altitude, and then it will guide itself into the satellite coordinate, the GPS coordinate put on the ground. Very precise. And we used it very effectively against Afghan wedding parties and Iraqi villagers. I'm being facetious, against the Taliban and Iraqi insurgents. But they didn't have modern technology on their side. We've given JDAM weapons to the Ukrainians, and they've employed them against the Russians. They don't work. They literally don't work. Why? Because the Russians jam the signal. As soon as the bomb's dropped, it becomes a dumb bomb. It doesn't go where it's supposed to go. Totally ineffective. The Russians, on the other hand, have taken their dumb bomb called the FAB. I think it's the FAB 250 is a 500-pound bomb. The FAB 500.
Now it's 1,500. Now they even have FAB 1,500. Good God. And it's kilograms. It's not pounds.
That's right. But they've put on what they call the glide. It becomes a glide bomb. So you drop the FAB, wings pop out, and they have a guidance factor on it. And this thing comes in. But the Russians have made it jam-proof. Andrei was talking about the fact that there's deep strike taking place in these casualties. These FABs are hitting troop concentrations as the Ukrainians bring in their troops. They bring in the command posts to get ready to coordinate this attack. They're getting hit before they get to the zero line. They're getting hit before they engage, and they're being eviscerated. You bring them in, and you get a 500, kilogram. That's a 1,000-pound bomb going off precisely in the middle of where you're at, or taking down the building where everybody's gone in. Almost everybody's going to die. The Russians have this precision strike capability now, and they use. Andrei was talking about the Russian version of the Excalibur. I think it's called begins with a K.
Krasnopol and Italov. Two types of them. Krasnopol and Italov. Yeah.
These are precision artillery shells. The Russians replicate everything we have. The Tornado is a very effective HIMARS equivalent, or better than the HIMARS. The HIMARS is being jammed too, being intercepted. But you don't hear about the Ukrainians jamming the Russian stuff. The Russians have pretty good electronic warfare. And my point is that there's every reason to believe that these casualty figures are what Andrei said. There's no reason to doubt it. I will say, historically speaking, we tend to find out after the fact that maybe not as many people died as we thought they did, because you see bodies go flying, but the human body is pretty resilient. Unless you get an artery cut or crushing of a major organ, humans can tend to get up and walk away from a lot of stuff that logically you'd say they can't. So we may find that more Ukrainians are alive than we thought dead, but not that many more. Because another big problem is they aren't very good at evacuating the wounded. And a lot of guys are dying in golden hour. If they were better at evacuating, they probably have less cat. The Russians are finding that so many of these Ukrainian wounded have been abandoned by their brethren, and the Russians end up coming in and saving lives, finding these critically wounded people, giving them first aid, evacuating them to the rear, giving them the life-saving surgery they need. So the casualties are what they are. But whatever the number is, it's big, and it another important thing about numbers is when a unit suffers between 50 and 69% casualties, it becomes combat ineffective. And virtually every Ukrainian brigade has become combat ineffective. They had to pulling these brigades out and doing a rapid, rearming, re-equipping, remanning. And the troops that are coming, now let's say you have a brigade like the 47th or the 36th or the 82nd, elite brigades that were handpicked, recruited. They picked the guys they wanted. They trained them in Europe, et cetera. They came in and they get burned out. They're down to 50% strength. They got to pull them out because they no longer are capable of doing their mission. They have to pull them out, and then they have to give them manpower replacements. Where are they coming from? Well, they're not coming from the pool of elite troops waiting to be put. They're coming from the guys who received 21 days of basic training, none of the fancy training in Europe, and they're being brought in to bring them up to manning levels, and then they send them in and they get slaughtered because the lack of training means they can't execute properly. They're getting outflanked, outmaneuvered, firepowered. They're getting eaten up more. They pull them out, redo them. Some of these brigades in this counteroffensive have been re-equipped or remanned 3 times. So a brigade is about 5,000 guys. That means that they're down to about 2,500 when they get pulled out. They probably don't get the full 2,500, but they get maybe another 1,500 to come in. They go in, boom, they're down. This means that they're losing an awful lot of guys. If you have 12 brigades of troops that are committed to this offensive, and they've been remanned 3 times, that's about 90,000 guys. Pop it 45,000. Boom. Pop it again 20. Pop it again. You're up over 71,000 that Putin's talking about already. Just doing the basic logic here without even doing any other analysis. So I think the numbers are pretty accurate. What does this mean? Garland, you and I have been talking. I think, Andrei, we've had the same conversation. I've been saying since the very beginning that I believe that the Ukrainian military will be strategically defeated by Russia by the end of summer, early fall. Well, it's the end of summer. So we've hit the bottom of this. But I'm looking at it, and it's happening. The Ukrainian army has reached the point where they can no longer effectively build up combat power. They don't have any troops left, any trained troops left. And so we are getting to the point where we're going to see, I believe, the collapse of the Ukrainian army. What does collapse look like? It happens when you can't maintain continuity along the entire line of contact. There will be gaps. The Russians will exploit those gaps. The Ukrainians will have a decision to stand or to withdraw. And at some point in time, the gaps become so big and so prevalent that the Ukrainians will have to make a decision to withdraw behind the Dnieper River to reconsolidate a defensive line. And I think that's the direction collapse is heading. But here's the key thing. War is politics by other means. I mean, this war doesn't end by the military defeat of the Ukrainian army. This war ends politically with a political decision. Andrei has said, and I agree, that the Kremlin's gathering around saying, how do you want this to end, guys? What do we want to accomplish? Where do we want to go? Do we want to lose 20,000 guys taking Kharkov and Odessa? Kharkov right now, a lot of the pro-Russian elements have fled. People don't realize that millions of Ukrainians have fled to Russia and are living in Russia right now. The people who are in Kharkov today are either indifferent or openly hostile
Yep.
to Russia. We can no longer call Kharkov a Russian city.
Absolutely.
And so, do you really want to go in and have that street-to-street fighting? Do you want to have a hostile population that's going to be carrying out a guerrilla warfare, etc.? Is it what Russia wants? The same thing with Odessa. I think Odessa has a significant Russian population still, but again, it's going to be bloody fighting. And the other thing is, there are tremendous consequences to taking Odessa and the Black Sea. I mean, everybody, it's like, do it, baby, cut the Ukrainians off from the Black Sea, deny them economic viability. But Putin's a smart guy, and he's going, do we really want to do that to Ukraine? Because the goal here isn't to destroy Ukraine. The goal here is to destroy the Banderists, but to leave something behind that is a viable nation state, that isn't going to be an economic anchor on Russia. And so I think there's a lot of calculations going on. I always believed that the military collapse would come first, and then it would precipitate a political collapse in Kiev. But things have happened recently that make me think that the political collapse might be coming sooner rather than later. Poland turning their back on Ukraine. Zelensky speaking to a near empty hall. The Republicans, Rand Paul is just steadfast saying, you ain't getting the money. And Zelensky is telling Chuck Schumer, if I don't get the money, the war's over. Baby, the war's over. And now here's the problem with Zelensky. He's such a corrupt SOB. I mean, Seymour Hersh has written that Zelensky is personally stolen $400 million out of the $113 billion that we've sent that way. 60 to 70% of the resources we send to Kiev, the financial resources, never make it to their intended destination. They go into the pockets of people. This is literally the most corrupt thing you can imagine. Zelensky stays in power because we've created a modern day Winston Churchill. He's the poster child for giving money. That's why he's running around with the tin cup, begging money. But the moment he comes back with an empty tin cup, it's all she wrote for him, because now he no longer has a reason to exist. And this is where Seymour Hersh's intelligence source is, I think, closer to first of all, I don't think the guy talking to Seymour is giving away what I call SIGINT, meaning I don't think he has access to phone calls. So it's not as though he's listening in and hearing Ukrainians say, we're going to mutiny up against them. I think this is a step back. It's an assessment. It's an analysis. But I don't think it's too far off. Why? Because when Zelensky goes, there's going to be a whole bunch of corrupt wolves running around. Just like if you take a look back when Boris Yeltsin was getting ready to step down, he was surrounded by people just frothing at the mouth saying, please let me have this corrupt Russian system and I'm going to just make so much money. And he turned to the one guy who wasn't corrupt, Vladimir Putin, and said, please step in and save Russia. Putin's first response was, no, I don't want the job. I'm not capable of doing the job. And Yeltsin came back and said, you have to do it because nobody else here can. They're all corrupt. They all want to rob, steal. I made mistakes. You need to come in, save Russia. Putin did. There's no one in Ukraine right now that Zelensky, if he ever had a moment where he suddenly felt remorse, could say, please step in and save Ukraine. Not even the senior generals can do that because they're all corrupt. But there are some mid-level generals, mid-level colonels, who are brave men, good fighters, who believe in Ukraine. And the interesting thing about good leaders at that level, they don't want to needlessly sacrifice their men. And they're looking at this conflict and they're going, my boys are dying for no reason. So now if Zelensky gets tossed, I think what you're going to see is more likely than not is a military coup of mid-level generals and colonels who are going to come in and say, all you corrupt guys up against the wall. And we may see that up against the wall moment. Maybe more than figurative. They may literally be putting people up against the wall and taking them down because this corruption has destroyed Ukraine. And they're going to step in. And I don't think they're going to say, let's continue the fight. What I think they're going to tell the Russians is, we need to have this war end. You guys need to be a little fair right now. Don't go for the kill. We're willing to accept your terms, but we also need to keep as much of Ukraine together as possible. The Banderas, don't worry. We just killed them all. Trust me. These professional military guys would turn on Azov like that. They would love nothing more than to machine gun down these bastards. All these ultranationalists better be fleeing to Canada. Maybe Freeland can take care of them. But
I'm going to jump over to Andrei. Something important I wanted to ask Andrei, so a week and a half ago, the chairman of North Korea, he comes to meets with Mr. Putin. He ends up at Roscosmos space station, which I find interesting because the week prior to that, the U.S. had done these war games, and for the first time, on the Korean Peninsula, and for the first time, they had the Space Command, whatever the hell it is, they were involved, and I find it interesting that Mr. Kim Jong-un, went to Roscosmos, and then he met with Sergei Shoigu, who showed him the latest MiG-31, and he showed him. Then this is all on television, all in the news. He's showing him these Kinzhal missiles. Even right now, I believe, I know at least Thursday, Mr. Shoigu was in Iran, and everywhere in all of the news he's talking about military cooperation, integration. I know recently the Iranians had received some trainer aircraft, and they're supposed to be getting, I don't know, Sukhois 30-something or others. What's going on? Is there some kind of a resistance front being built? Do you think that the Russians will maybe help the North Koreans get some satellites into the air, help them with some technical? What's happening with all of this? Seems to be something. And next month, now at this, Wang Yi from China, he's just been in Moscow, and Mr. Putin is heading to China next month. A whole lot going on. Make some sense of that, Andrei Martyanov.
In terms of North Korea, what we shouldn't forget, when Kim Jong-un went to Russia, and of course he was accompanied by Mr. Manturov, who is the deputy prime minister responsible for the industries, manufacturing, and of course Mr. Shoigu and Mr. Borisov, which is Roscosmos, all former cadre or present military people. What we shouldn't forget, the moment it happened, Prime Minister of Japan, through the Foreign Ministry of Japan, immediately stated that we are ready to meet with Mr. Kim Jong-un without any preliminary conditions and discuss all complex of the issues which surround our relationship. There you go. That's what Scott was quoting Clausewitz. War is the politics by other means. But guess what? Deng Xiaoping rephrased this thing. Diplomacy is the continuation of the war by other means. And you saw the perfect application of this thing. Now, so it's very clear that basically North Korea now, it's not going to be just opened militarily, because Russia will provide, of course, if need be, under certain circumstances, issues which are really crucial, strategic in nature, targeting, ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. That is very important. But this is not only that, of course, it's just to actually offset Japan and basically militarization of Japan, which is ongoing. And what do? You provide the counterweight. And many people still do not understand that actually China has a very complicated relations with North Korea. But North Koreans actually consider Russians their friends. And the joy of Mr. Kim Jong-un was not just looking at those latest military toys. The joy was because it means economic opening of North Korea to this gigantic market, and those huge Russian programs fully financed on the development of the Far East, and of course the economic relations with China. Guess what North Koreans will be getting out of it, apart from the fact that they de facto now gonna be protected to a certain degree by Russia, is the fact that they will get a lot of workforce for those programs. It is a cheap workforce. They do not require much, but they will be actually trained into the very serious skills. And they are great builders, actually. And there's a lot to build in the Far East. And this is just the part of it. So it's more complex than its military economic development. It is strategic offset of the South Korea and militarization of Japan, which already basically, started to kind of, go back on a lot of things. Iran is now practically full ally of Russia. And actually, when the events in Armenia and with Nagorno-Karabakh were happening, actually Shoigu being the guest of the chief of the general staff of Iranian army, both of them were trying to call Mr. Pashinyan. And guess what? He gave orders to his generals too, not to answer the phone. Well, Iran stated, okay, everything is clear. We didn't want to have any kind of the NATO penetration into Armenia, but you know what? Times change, people change, countries change, relations change, and then we have this whole perturbation, so to speak, the change of the strategic picture in the larger sense in the basically Caucasus, and suddenly in 3 days, guess what? Things changed. And again, they did change, not to the basically advantage of those neocons in Washington, D.C. Do not forget, Pashinyan is the creature of Washington. He is basically American, boy. And so when you look at this, they again expected something else, and again didn't count the fact that Azerbaijan is a very serious link in the north-south corridor, which is being built as we speak. Russia and Iran begin to move a lot of, trade, a lot of commodities between themselves, and it starts at Murmansk and Arkhangelsk, and the whole idea is to tie north of Russia to the Indian Ocean and the Persian Gulf. And this is what's the name of the game. So, and then suddenly they did this, and okay, the Russians said, we had it with Armenia, we had it with, and as you remember, Mr. Peskov 2 days ago, spokesperson for Kiev, stated what? That I never thought I would hear this in my life, being from the region. I almost got killed, because of those events which started in 1988. Well, early in 87, but in 88, that's when it all splashed. When Mr. Peskov stated it's Azerbaijan's internal affairs. Done. And now suddenly we have a very different picture in terms of Eurasia and where it is all going. What can I say? I think so that there were more important news which I wrote about in my blog, especially with this new development. Oh no, it's not Kinjal. We know that Kinjal is there, new Zircon is being deployed in the surface fleet, and Mr. Kim Jong-un was shown the ships which already carry probably 3M-22 hypersonic anti-shipping missiles. But the point was, which I pay attention, many people, well, they know it obviously among professional circles, I'm pretty sure in Pentagon, it's the new, which is called KHBD, the cruise missile with the range, well, Russian Ministry of Defense say it above 6,500 kilometers. Well, the number is now up to 8,500 kilometers, and it could be carried not only by the strategic bombers, it could be carried by Su-34s. This is, that literally means Su-34, U.S. keyhole satellites, all those, constellation of American ISR, which looks, flies over and constantly flies over Engels Air Base with all those strategic bombers there. They do count them. They do track them. How do you track now 150 Su-34s? And then suddenly you have Su-34, which was created as actually frontline heavy, fighter bomber. It can carry, well, I speculate, 3, maybe 4 strategic cruise missiles. If it flies from Magadan, it can launch at anywhere into up to Denver. It just literally covers this arc. And the United States doesn't have even a viable air defense against that type of the target. That's what I'm saying. We have some. That is why so much movement. Not only the fact that it happens obviously at what remains of the front on the special military operation. We have issues of Syria flaring up. There will be a lot of things happening.
Africa.
Africa. Oh my
Africa's
God!
huge.
Don't even start there. You just.
That's a whole nother
Oh,
show.
yeah,
Interesting things, particularly with Mali, West Africa, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger now coming together for the military alliance.
Yeah, it's
With
just.
Algeria,
It's the remaking of world order, the likes we didn't see even during World War II. World War II was there are two huge theaters, pretty much mostly naval theater of operations in Pacific, with the brilliant, U.S. Navy, and Marines fighting there, and then of course you had Europe. And there were some movements, Northern Africa. It was kind of secondary. These were these huge theaters of operations. Okay, we have now literally global. We have the whole world moving, and moving to such. And those who haven't been players before, you're right. Look at Africa. My gosh, Niger was selling for 1 kilogram of uranium for $8, while in reality the price of the 1 kilogram of uranium is $200 per kilogram. I mean that whatever the substance they France was making killing on that. They were making killing on that, and now Niger tells them just go screw yourself. You know what? And good for them. So.
Well, let's do this. Since we're running towards the end, I'm going to do 10 minutes. I'll do 5 minutes each, and we'll start with you. We're going to talk about military hardware. I know 5 minutes is a lot of time, but I don't want to keep you guys but so long. What have we learned? What has changed, Scott, as far as, military? When this thing first started, it was like, old school. People were thinking of of the military war, a big columns of tanks coming after each other, blah, blah, blah. Now it's all standoff. It's drones. I see pictures of guys, just regular old soldiers. And they got a little thing in their hand and they're flying drones and they're targeting and the drones are attacking. Certainly we've seen the work of the Russian anti-aircraft and air defense. What have we learned about military hardware during this conflict? I'm going to start it now. 5 minutes. Scott Ritter.
I think one of the biggest revolutions taking place in this conflict is drone warfare, but we have to be careful in overemphasizing what's going on right now. This is positional warfare. This is trench warfare, and so that's completely different than the kind of war that I prepared for, which was the large-scale median engagement, where you have divisions moving towards each other, and the battle is defined when the first units make contact, and you begin to maneuver. A completely different concept of war than what's being done right now. But I don't think anybody anticipated this positional warfare, and they've made adjustments. And what they've done with drones is amazing. Some of this drone capability will play over. These lording drones, these kamikaze drones, play a role everywhere. It gives you, again, deep strike capability that didn't exist prior. In terms of the actual hardware, let me put it this way. A tank is a piece of metal that's junk until you put men in it. What we've learned in this conflict is that the most important thing out there is the manpower. Trained manpower, motivated manpower. They can take any tank and make it more lethal than a superior tank with less qualified personnel. And this is the most telling thing here. It is the quality of the soldier, the quality of the leadership that matters more than anything. And this is where Russia has shown. Early on, everybody sort of had an artificial understanding of what the Russian military was. And then when we failed to understand what Russia was trying to accomplish in phase one, thinking that they're going to try to seize Kiev, we didn't understand the diplomatic game. Immediately, we downgraded the Russian military. Russian military has always been professional. But here's the interesting thing. They've absorbed 300,000 mobilized reservists that everybody assumed wouldn't want to be there. Look at the Alyosha tank. Okay, you know what I'm talking about. The one tank against the 8 Ukrainians, famous battle. The crew, one a contract soldier, one volunteer, 2 mobilized. They all got the same gold star because they all wanted to be there. They were all professionals. They were all motivated. They're all willing to give their lives for their country. The Russians have perfected mobilization. They've perfected absorbing volunteers. They've perfected integrating them. The Russian manpower today is a superior warrior than anything that exists in the world. And this is the one thing that came out. It's not about the equipment. It's about the men in the equipment, the heart in the men, and the skills and the professionalism of those who are leading them in the combat. And Russia's the #1 military in the world today because they have absorbed all the lessons and they've made all the right decisions. They're not perfect, but they're better than anything else out there.
I don't hear you.
Andre, your thoughts on what we've
Absolutely.
learned about?
Subscribe to every word that
Go ahead.
Scott stated. Personnel, people, what they meant, how they meant it, so it matters a great deal, tremendous, the main factor, give me a good man, so, and this is absolutely correct. In terms of hardware, we certainly should also not forget, though, the issue not only of the drones, but hypersonic weapons. They perform freaking amazing. And I am on the record since last year, and I will repeat it again. By the time when we will get the white paper on performance of Russian air defense, we will have jaw-dropping of people when they recognize what have been accomplished in terms of the air defense. It's just mind-boggling. Now, Garland, can I do the plug-in? Can I plug something?
Certainly.
This is our, and me and Scott's, our favorite Clarity Press. This is it's Dr. Fadilama, Why the West Can't Win. Read this book, guys, and I will try to, although, listen, I suck as interviewer, I am not journalist. I need to somehow arrange the interview with Dr. Lama, but this is, people can buy the book on Amazon and or Clarity Press, guys. This is where me and Scott will also publish through this wonderful, our, great editor, Diana Collier, and so please do that, and I will try to train myself to ask proper questions. I got used to primarily answer, not
right. Well, before we go, your thoughts on the issue of the tanks, because what we were told prior, that the West had these great tanks. There was the Challenger, there was the Leopard, there was whatever. Now they're saying, oh, well, the Abrams tanks maybe. And your thoughts of with the ability of these drones. I saw where basically a Coronet that was made in the 1980s is taking out the latest tank.
Yeah.
Has the concept of tank warfare changed?
I'm pretty sure it should, because as I quote myself, sorry for being arrogant, nothing gets away from Cornet or KA-52 or Mi-28. Simple as that. I mean, and this is just, but now that why when we talk about Krasnopol, both versions, first and second version, which is smart munition, high precision. I mean, no matter what you do, when you have 152 millimeter, which is precision guided at the top of your turret, and they can hit you like from 30 kilometers. They just need the targeting. They just need that's pretty much. And a lot of actually, well, Challengers have been shot, blown up by Cornets, but some of the Leopards and a lot of Tu-64s and Tu-72s of Ukraine, Armed Forces of Ukraine, they have been hit on the top by Krasnopol shells, smart munitions. So it becomes pretty tough for tanks to be on the modern battlefield. You need air cover, I guess, and really good air defense.
All right. Scott Ritter, where can people find your stuff?
ScottRitterExtra.com. That's where my Substack is. That's where I post every video, every podcast that I appear on. It's also where, if people are interested, I'm making a documentary film to try and be the antidote to Russophobia. It's called Waging Peace. And, documentaries aren't free. They cost money to make. So if anybody's interested in assisting and helping fund, there's a little tab there, wagingpeace.fund, and it would be greatly appreciated.
All right. Don't forget, Scott's got to feed the family. We all got to pay bills. So go to ScottRitterExtra.com and do what you have to do.
On my blog, Scott is in my list of blogs. And there are very few blogs there, but Scott isn't there.
All right. And where can people, what's your blog and your YouTube channel?
Oh God, Smoothie X12, for crying out. This smoothie thing is now, Jesus, I say, this is not a porn. I don't do, what it's called there, fans only, because if I'll start, the platform will implode, and people will never try the table. So, Smoothie X12 at blogspot.com. And so there you go, guys.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. And my good friend, Danny Haifong, I talked to him earlier. I think he's got a live stream that's going to be going on any minute. So anyone who wants to continue watching, jump over to Danny Haifong. He always has a lot of great guests. Thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate it. Everyone, don't forget, I am not on Twitter again. Scott and I, we're on again and off again in Twitter. Right now, I'm off again. So since I'm off again, share this video on all of your social media platforms. Also, don't forget, go to rockfin.com and /Garland Nixon, because on any given day, they may wake up and toss me off YouTube. And if they do, you can go to Rockfin and all my stuff is going to be there too. Thanks a lot, guys. And thanks a lot, everyone. As I said, smash the old like button. Oh, wait a minute. It's Thursday Night Football. Stiff arm the like button. Everybody, stiff arm the old like button and share this on all your social media.